Oddly enough, and what felt like on the day, and really when I look back at it and you look at my pace and my heart rate just slowly dying right from the get-go, I didn't hit what was the traditional wall. I was climbing a mountain of a hill this entire race. Failing to plan is planning to fail. Failing to plan is planning to fail. Failing to plan is planning to fail. I had planned the training before this marathon. I had planned for the marathon, and I had planned for what this video was going to be, and I completely threw that out the window in all three cases. If you want to go back and see how my training went, my training actually honestly went quite well, but it was a long marathon training block, so it didn't go perfectly, and my decision on what I was going to run on race day did change over time. And we're going to get into that today. We won't talk too much about my marathon training. Again, if you want to see that, I'll put a couple of links to videos that I think probably do the best at showcasing that in the description down below. But if you are new, check out my channel. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. I think there's going to be a lot over there that we can learn from. The goal, if you are new, sub 3 somehow, we're going to get there by the end of the year. We're really going to try to get there by the end of the excuse me. By the end of the year. It's going to take some effort. We've got a little bit of a hill to climb here, but we're going to get there. By the way, if you're hearing it in my throat, I apologize. I didn't want to have a plan for this video. I was thinking about what I did want to say, and I thought the best thing to do was just to tell you exactly how I'm feeling. Otherwise, I'm going to skew how I'm feeling, and I don't want to do that. I want to share with you my complete honesty on how this race went. So, I'm a little bit sick, and I was sick leading into this race. And for the 2 weeks leading up to this marathon, I was feeling really, really flat. And my hope was that marathon morning, I would wake up and magically the marathon taper crazies, all that stuff would be completely out of me, and I would be feeling spectacular. That just did not happen. I woke up race day morning, stomach wasn't 100%, had my usual bagel, coffee, electrolytes, got ready for race day, had my biggest supporters of all, the most important people to me in the world, my family with me to hop in the car and go over to the race. It was a local race, so you get all those benefits of not having to be there too early. You can drive over, you know where you're going, very low stress. And I was not stressed this morning. It was actually kind of bothering me that I wasn't anxious and the adrenaline wasn't pumping. It just felt like another day. I should have been more nervous than I was, so I wasn't quite sure. It was kind of messing with my head that I couldn't figure out what was going on. By the way, it's Thursday night. I haven't run since the marathon. And again, as I mentioned, I was a little bit sick. I teach grade 1 during the day, which I mention a lot on this channel. And life does not happen in a vacuum. And although running is important to me, those grade 1 kids are just, they're more important to me. So my recovery has been keeping up with grade 1s all week, and that can be a lot. So bear with me and we'll get through this. Got over to the race. Normally for me, it looks very similar regardless of what length of the race I'm actually doing, with little changes on how I actually warm up. And the plan was to get over the race, run about 10-15 minutes, super easy, and then do some strides where I picked up 2 race pace, just to remind the body of what it was going to be feeling, how fast race pace actually felt. But I didn't do that. I kind of didn't have it in me. I went out of the car, over to the race, straight to the porta potty, did what I needed to do in there, got out of the porta potty, and immediately ran into Floyd. Now, the reason why I mentioned Floyd is that when we bumped into each other, it was our first time meeting. I've followed Floyd on Strava, and he's followed me back. He's commented on a lot of my runs. He watched a lot of my videos over the years, and we had never met. So it was really, really nice. Floyd, if you're watching this, my day had been going okay up until that point, but you kind of lit the spark on what I, after speaking with you, felt like was going to be a great day. So if you see me out on a run or at a race, unless I'm in the middle of running really hard and in a lot of pain, or I'm in the middle of running a PR and I just don't want to waste the energy, to be honest, make sure you flag me down, because It just warms me up is the bad word. I said this was going to be unscripted. It means a lot to me. It's one of the main reasons why I share these, is that I hope that somebody out there is getting something out of these videos. And when I hear it, it meant a lot to me, Floyd. Thank you for that. All right, so got over to the start line and ran into Tim. Now, Tim's the main character to the story beyond me, because Tim is a local runner who I respect more than almost any other local runner out there. Maybe respect more than any other local runner. And it's for some very specific reasons. I knew would be dialed into exactly what he wanted to do on the day. And for the week before, we'd been messaging back and forth. And Tim's original goal for months, probably for years, would be to run a sub-3 marathon. But unlike me, his fitness had shown him that he was there. He was going to do it. But 6 weeks before the race, Tim stepped off a curb, hurt his foot, hadn't been running that much, felt like his fitness had backed off a little bit, didn't really know what the foot was going to give him on the day, so his plan shifted. Tim's plan shifted to starting off at what ended up being right around sub 310 pace, and then he would dial that down to sub 305, and then eventually he would, if he had anything left in the tank and he was feeling good, try to get sub 3 or as close as he could by the end of the race. So big negative split if everything was going well. That made a whole lot of sense for me, because I felt, and I still feel, I was in 305 to 310 shape. A lot of workouts showed me that. So it made sense for me to start with him, as long as he agreed that if at any point during the race I couldn't keep up, he would drop me, and he made it very clear that he was not waiting for anybody. So he started off the race, and I felt flat. The first 5 kilometers, the first part of this race, my legs were feeling flat. Pace was dialed in. I was running with Tim, so I didn't have to worry about that. And heart rate seemed fine. Spiked a little bit that first kilometer, but didn't reach anywhere close to threshold. I was well within my means in terms of effort. But the problem was the feel of that effort. The perceived effort was higher than it should have been at that point, because everything was dead. Everything was feeling flat. My body felt like it had already run the marathon before we even started. So I was getting this feeling like we're going to bear with it. Maybe things are going to turn around. It's okay. My heart rate's in check. Everything's going great. That's not rising. Nothing is showing in terms of my heart, which is what I run a lot of my runs on. Nothing is showing that I'm in trouble here. So we stayed at that pace. I stayed with Tim. Somewhere within the first 10 kilometers, we caught up with the pack. Tim really got me to run with the pack, about 10 other runners. And we ran along. They were running at almost exactly the pace that we wanted to run, just sub 310. And I put my head down and I just was looking to weather the storm. And at some point, I looked up and Tim was gone. Now, when I looked up and Tim wasn't there anymore, I wasn't surprised, because I knew at some point he would probably want to run a little bit faster, because he was looking to cut down the pace a little bit. But this group had been running right at the pace I felt like I could handle at the moment. So my only concern was head down following this group. And I stayed with this group right up until around 17 kilometers. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the majority of this group just kind of split up. Nobody really surged. Nobody really backed off. Everything just kind of split up. But I was left with a couple of different people, and we ran all the way to the half marathon point. And it came down to me and one other runner that I've run with a couple of times before, and I knew he was going for right around the same pace, so I thought I'd stick with him. Not a lot of words were spoken, but you know how it is. If you've ever run races, sometimes you don't need to speak. You just know you have this agreement, you're going to run together. And got through the halfway point. I saw Tim. Tim had actually decided that his race was going to be over at halfway because his foot was starting to bother him, and he didn't want to risk it in the second half. We'll get into why that was probably a really good decision for Tim, given his foot. But that one runner that I was running with up until that point clearly was feeling fresher than I was. And it wasn't long after that halfway point where I started to slip the pace a little bit. Now, this is where, if I had scripted this, I may have written a little bit of a different story, because at about the 30-kilometer mark, it's the first time you get off the pavement in this race, and you start running on gravel and dirt. And for the next 8 kilometers, you were on gravel and dirt, which turned into a whole lot of mud that morning. It was at that point that my pace completely died off. I bumped into somebody who had run the Boston Marathon just a few weeks before that, and they were doing party pace because they had last minute signed up for this race and then immediately knew a few kilometers in that it wasn't going to be their day. And so I was running with him. Great guy, first time I'd ever met him. And I ran that party pace for about 8 kilometers through the mud, slipping all over the place. Now, when I originally thought how I was going to make this video, I was going to pinpoint that was my demise. At that point in the mud, and when I've talked to a few people after I've said that. But the reality is that somewhere around kilometers 23, 24, all the way to 30, my mind and my body was already starting to give up. Oddly enough, and what felt like on the day, and really when I look back at it, and you look at my pace and my heart rate just slowly dying right from the get-go, I didn't hit what was the traditional wall. I was climbing a mountain of a hill this entire race. And it really, really honestly has played with my head since then. I just didn't have it on the day. And when I got to the dirt and I got to the mud, it seemed like a convenient excuse to give myself. My heart rate while I was running that section was in the low 130s. There was a point there where I was making this thing up in my head, and I had said to a few people that my hamstring was bothering me a little bit, and I really just didn't want to risk it. I was running through that mud, and there might have been something to that, but really it was kind of just an excuse. I didn't mentally, I had checked out. I didn't grind on the day. So I got to about kilometer, I had to check. I got to about kilometer 38 and we hit the pavement again. And I thought, let's try to salvage what we have left. And I put my head down and I ran. And what's funny is I still feel like I didn't run quite as hard as my legs could carry me on the day, or even at that point in the race, towards the end of the marathon. I felt like I ran as hard as my mind and my heart could carry me towards the end of that race. So it was tough. And it's tough to admit that here. And I think I had kind of been kidding myself about that. Oh.
Here you go.
Oh, thank you, buddy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, buddy. My son just brought me. I think he was probably listening on the other side of this, but my son just brought me this Reese cups, this giant cup. Maybe to make me feel better. I'm going to eat this. I don't care. Training starts next week. Okay. Now I am incredibly happy to have gotten a PR. A little bit over 6 minutes faster than I've ever run the marathon distance before. And it's okay that I didn't hit the pace or the mark or the time that I thought I was capable of on the day. And I do think that the weather played a factor. I do think being a little bit sick played a factor. I do think that it was not in the cards for me to run what I was hoping to run on the day. But when I'm slightly just, and this is where this is unscripted, and I just want to be completely honest with you guys. I'm slightly just not, what's not settling great for me is that I feel like mentally I gave up on the race. And that's tough because you train for these things for so long. And yes, I know it means nothing in terms of I'm not elite, I'm not sub-elite, I'm just a guy in his 40s trying to get faster, chasing somewhat seem to be arbitrary goals. But I set these goals with some real intent of pushing myself as far as I can towards those goals. And that is where the magic is for me. Pushing myself. And giving myself the belief that I can do hard things. And showing my kids that I can do hard things. Now, to them, I ran a great marathon. And again, PR, but we gave up on it just a little bit. Now, you'll see me looking off, and I know it's getting out of focus a little bit because it's losing my face, looking off quite a bit over where you can't see. Maybe I'll put this up on the screen. But it's weird. I look at the heart rate and I look at the pace in the graph on Strava, and it kind of tells you the story of mentally where I did kind of slowly convince myself less of the importance to me on the day. I don't know whether this will make it in. It keeps kind of going out of focus. But I think we're going to leave it in. And I apologize for how slow this video got. But it's important for me that I share with you guys exactly how I'm feeling. So where do we go from here? Sub 3, somehow, is still the goal. That's it. Talk to you guys in the next video.